in a stone-grey city as cold as ashes, where angel statues seemed to have forgotten how to smile, lived a man named Edric Halwyn, the son of a coffin maker and a mother burned for witchcraft. Edric did not choose medicine. Medicine chose him. It was the year 1348. Dunwich still slumbered under a fog thick as funeral silk. But when the church bell tolled, it wasn't prayers that followed. It was screaming. A child had died. Tongue purple, eyes bulging, black blood dripping from the mouth. They said it was the devil's mark. But Edric, bending over that small, broken body, saw no demon, only disease. From that moment on, he crossed into the forbidden. In that time, no one treated illness. They prayed, they bled, they beat, they took notes. He dissected the dead silently, by candlelight, and sketched each tendon, each rotting organ. He wanted to know, why do people die? Why could a healthy man at dawn become a corpse by dusk? Whispers began. People saw flickering candlelight from his hut all night long. They heard murmuring, like unholy chants. Soon they called him Halwyn the bot, and yet the powerful whispered something else, that Edric could save the bishop's son from death, that he could boil a man's blood like metal and drive the sickness out. No one thanked him publicly, but corpses piled up more slowly. The wells no longer overflowed with bloated bodies. Edric was invited into homes where once his mother had been cast out in chains of thorn. He was offered red wine, made to sit across from nobles and diagnose imbalances of black bile. But his eyes, always direct, always calm, held the knowledge of someone who'd seen far too much of what lay beneath living flesh. And perhaps that's when things began to crack. Because Edric did not just heal, he began to experiment. He once believed that enough knowledge could stop death, but knowledge is not gifted to mankind gently. It is carved from corpses, from blood, from the screaming of the dying. And Ed did not stop. In an abandoned crypt beneath an old monastery, once a dungeon for witches and heretics, Edric made his laboratory. There was no surgical table, only a slab of stone cold as guilt, no bright light, only firelight that danced like damned souls. There, he opened the chests of plague victims to study. Hearts turned to jelly. He boiled lung fluids in copper pots and inhaled the fumes to understand the rot. Sometimes he kept patients alive, just long enough, injecting them with liquors infused with herbs he called white fire of life. The sick would seize, scratch, eyes rolling back, then fall silent. Edric sketched it all, like a painter capturing the death of fallen angels. Yet deep down, he still believed he was saving them. One winter night, snow fell like ash from some distant volcanic curse. Edric was summoned to Viscount Alwyn's manor. The nobleman's wife had just died of black blood. His daughter, little Isolde, lay feverish, covered in boils. Edric looked into her sunken eyes, a willow branch of a girl, her breath tethered by death's own thread. Everyone had given up. He had not. From his leather pouch he took a small knife of dark steel and a vial of amber liquid. Instead of prayer, he made an incision on her wrist, drew poo, mixed it with white fire, and dripped it back into a new wound. He whispered not a blessing, but a formula. A day passed. Isolde lived. 3 days. She breathed easier. 7 days. She sat up and spoke her mother's name. A miracle. Perhaps no. Edric called it a physiological response. But the servants, who saw him slice a child's skin, mixing blood and herbs like a sorcerer brewing poison, began to whisper, and then to scream. Rumors moved faster than the plague, that he raised the dead, that he bargained with demons for a child's soul. Soon, the Bishop of Dunwich, the very man Edric once saved, arrived with a sealed indictment. The charge, heresy, defying God's will, and practicing forbidden medicine. The question wasn't what he'd done, it was why they turned so quickly. No one remembered who he saved. Only the incisions, the jars of viscera, and the parchment made from skin, inked with non-Latin words. And so, they came, not to cure, but to condemn. They did not take Edric to prison. They paraded him through Dunwich's streets, shackled in iron, not to escape, but so the people could see, so they could gaze at the man who dared use blades instead of prayers. The crowd was silent. No shouting, but that silence was heavier than any curse. Faces he once healed now stared like cold headstones. Those who once nodded thanks now turned away as if watching plague approach. The trial was not held in the cathedral, but beneath it in the crypts, where witches once confessed through screams. The smell of ash, old blood, and fear clung to the walls. 3 hooded judges sat beneath a cross, but not a holy one. Upon it hung a wooden effigy with an open belly, its ribs spread like a warning. Edric Halwyn, the verdict caller, rasped, "You are charged with defying divine will, violating sacred flesh, and performing unclean rituals in the name of medicine." Edric did not flinch. He had cut too many cadavers to fear accusations. "I healed them," he said. "Not with miracles, but with understanding." "Who are you?" a priest roared, "to undo God's punishments." Edric met his gaze. "If God made man, then I only studied his work, like a blacksmith studies metal, or a clockmaker, the gears of time." But reason spoke a dead tongue in that room. They presented his journal filled with drawings of hearts, lungs, blood paths, and they called it the devil's scripture. They displayed his knife, his vials, even a piece of preserved human skin used for antiseptic experiments, each item a blade into his already bleeding soul. Finally, they brought out Isolde, the girl he'd saved, now healthy, but bound and forced to speak. "He cut me. He dripped things into me. I heard whispers in the fire. I saw shadows in my sleep." One tear slid down her cheek. Edric knew it wasn't a lie, only a memory bent by fear. The sentence came by the light of a dying candle, death by fire. 3 days hence, on the blood square, he was thrown into a stone cell. Rats and rust were his only companions. Outside, someone cried. Inside, he remained silent. But on the second night, there was a knock in the wall. A young friar, no older than 30, eyes filled not with hatred, but something dangerously close to hope. "I read your journal," he whispered. "What you wrote. It's not witchcraft, it's knowledge. I believe you." Edric studied him, like looking into a mirror from 20 years ago, full of fire and naive belief. "Then take this," Edric said, handing him a scrap of vellum hidden in a bone tube. "A formula. If I die, let truth live." That morning, the bells tolled thrice short, once long, the code for public burning. All of Dunwich gathered in the blood square, the ground still stained from the Last Judgment. The wind howled through torn flags. No one left. They came to see the heretics scream. They wanted fire, the kind that purged guilt and silenced the doubts truth always breeds. Edric was dragged forward, gaunt hair wild like dead roots. But his eyes, they still burned, not with fear, but clarity. The pyre was built of dry thorns and seasoned oak, tall as a soldier. Above it, an inverted cross, the symbol for those who defied morality. A friar read curses aloud. Then came the torch. Flames licked his feet. Sparks danced like spirits freed from bone. The smell of charred flesh began to rise. But Edric did not scream, did not beg. He spoke only one line, quiet, steady, meant for ears that still dared to listen. "Truth does not die in fire. It sleeps in ash." And then the fire took him. The crowd dispersed, proud of their virtue, satisfied that order had been restored. But weeks later, the bishop's own son fell ill. Boils, fever, rot. No one could help. None dared touch him, except one man, a young friar, who opened a small leather book, handwritten in black ink, with looping script like twisted roots. Case 42, lymphatic bubo infection, lance abscess, cleanse with distilled willow and mugwort. He obeyed. The boy lived. The story spread that someone had cured plague using Halwyn's methods, that the heretic's notebook wasn't a grimoire, it was a key. The crown banned it. The church burned any copies, but scraps survived, in wanderers' cloaks, pirate ships, and even a Prussian king's library. Centuries later, when science was finally granted its name, diagrams surfaced bearing the initials of. Scholars speculated. Edric Halwyn, a name erased from medicine, but whispered like a ghost in history's ear. Some say Edric never died, that when the fire faded, his body was gone, only white ash, and a single set of charred footprints leading into the forest. They say, on moonless nights, a faint glow flickers in ancient crypts, where someone still writes the truth inside the flesh of the dead. Or maybe, it's just legend. But one thing is certain, history buried him as a criminal. Time, which never kneels to fear, raised him as a prophet, burned alive. Because some fires do not destroy, they illuminate the path out of ignorance.